I still remember that night vividly. The night when everything that seemed to have just ended was actually only beginning in a way I had never prepared myself to face. It had been less than 2 days since my parents' funeral. The flowers were still fresh. The condolences still echoed somewhere in my mind. The scent of incense, the wood of the church, the choked voices of familiar faces. Everything remained intact, as if the loss hadn't had time to settle yet. And yet when I stood in front of the house, my key no longer worked. I tried again, then a third time. Not because I didn't understand what was happening, but because I didn't want to believe it could happen this quickly. That house was where I grew up, where I had spent the last 2 years taking care of my mother as she fought cancer, where I had sat for hours beside her bed holding her hand when she no longer had the strength to speak. But now, it no longer welcomed me. I walked around to the back, my heartbeat slowing in a strange way, as if my body was trying to stretch this moment a few seconds longer before the truth hit. And then I saw it. All of my belongings, packed into cardboard boxes stacked against the garage wall. Some were soaked from the afternoon rain. The edges had softened and curled. A corner of my diploma stuck out, wrinkled like something worthless. I stood there for a long time. No tears, no reaction. Just a kind of emptiness. So deep it was terrifying. She looked like she had just finished a normal, relaxing evening, not like someone who had just thrown her sister-in-law out of the house. She looked at me. No guilt, no discomfort, just a passing glance, as if I were something not worth her attention. Then she gave a faint smile, raised her glass slightly like a quiet toast, and turned back inside. The door closed behind her. Soft, final, like closing a chapter that no longer mattered. I took out my phone. My hands were so cold it took a few seconds to press the right name. Daniel picked up almost immediately. "You've seen it right." His voice was calm, too calm. "You changed the locks." "Yeah." A short answer. "I thought you'd understand." I let out a quiet laugh so small even I found it strange. "Understand what?" "That this house no longer has anything to do with you." The sentence fell lightly, but it was enough to shatter everything inside me. "Daniel, we haven't even read the will yet." "The will is just a formality," he replied instantly, as if rehearsed. "Dad made it clear a long time ago. Sons inherit, daughters don't." I tightened my grip on the phone. I had heard that sentence my whole life, but never this cold. "I stayed here for 2 years," I said, my voice still strangely steady. "I took care of Mom every day. When she couldn't walk, when she couldn't eat, that was your choice." He cut me off. No hesitation. No pause. Just one simple sentence, erasing everything I had done. "You could have had a different life," he continued. "A better job, a better future. But you chose to stay here and be Mom's private nurse. That wasn't my responsibility." I stayed silent for a few seconds. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I realized nothing I said would matter. "I'll give you 24 hours, Daniel added. "Get all your things out. Otherwise, I'll have someone handle it." "My things are already outside." "Then that makes it easier." I closed my eyes. A very brief moment, but enough to understand that this conversation had ended long before it began. "Fine," I said. And I hung up. No argument, no pleading, no more questions. I sat down on the damp grass next to the boxes. My coat soaked through, but I didn't notice. My hand moved unconsciously into my pocket and stopped when I felt something familiar. My mother's watch. Old, worn, worthless to anyone else. But the only thing I knew was truly mine. I held it tightly in my palm. And then I saw it. A cream-colored envelope buried among my things. My name was written on it in handwriting I would recognize anywhere. "For Emily Carter, when the time comes." My heart skipped, not because of hope, but because of something harder to name, as if something had been left unsaid. I picked up the letter but didn't open it immediately. I was afraid. Afraid that inside would be nothing more than a final comfort from my mother. A gentle goodbye like everything she had always been. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "My mother was never that predictable." And I was right. What I didn't know was that for the past 8 years, she had been quietly preparing for this exact moment. I didn't open the letter that night. Not because I didn't want to know, but because a part of me had grown too used to expecting nothing. I was afraid that if I opened it, it would only be a gentle message. A simple stay strong, just like all the times before. And I wasn't sure I still had the strength to hear another comforting word, without anything actually changing. Because for 26 years, that was all I had ever received. Beautiful words, but never a place that truly belonged to me. I was born into a family where everything had already been decided, even if no one ever said it out loud. Daniel was the eldest son. That alone was enough to determine almost everything. I still remember those weekend afternoons when I was little. Dad would be in the garage teaching Daniel how to use tools, how to fix things, how to become a real man, the sound of metal clashing, their laughter echoing all the way to the backyard. And me, I was in the kitchen with Mom, chopping vegetables, washing dishes, wiping the table. No one forced me to do those things, but no one ever asked if I wanted to do anything else. Everything happened so naturally that I didn't even realize I was being placed into a fixed role. If you've ever grown up in a family where your role was decided before you even understood it, you know that feeling. There are no raised voices, no obvious discrimination. Just silence repeated long enough to become a rule. Daniel was 6 years older than me. He wasn't a bad person, at least not in the beginning. He used to carry me when I was little, walk me across the street, protect me from older kids in the neighborhood. But then, things changed. Not because he changed drastically, but because he started believing what was said about him. Sons carry on the family name. Sons are responsible for the family. Sons deserve more. If you hear something long enough, you stop questioning it. You begin to believe that it's the truth. I remember when I was 18, and I said I wanted to study nursing. Dad didn't get angry. He just looked at me for a few seconds and said something I will never forget. A daughter isn't worth that kind of investment. You'll get married anyway. No argument. No discussion. Just a conclusion that had already been decided. I didn't say anything that day. I just nodded, as if I agreed. But I still applied. Still chased scholarships. Still worked 2 jobs at the same time to pay for my tuition. Not to prove anything to him, but because I understood. If I didn't do it myself, no one would do it for me. During all that time, Daniel had everything. His college tuition fully paid, connections introduced to him, opportunities laid out in front of him. Dad called it investing in the right place. And me, I was called independent. It sounded like a compliment. But in reality, it was just another way of saying, you're on your own. Mom was the only one who made things a little easier. She never openly opposed Dad, never argued, never created conflict. But she was always there, in her own quiet way. A warm meal when I came home late. A gentle hand holding mine when I was too exhausted to speak. A soft whisper meant only for me. I know you're trying. That was all. But for me, it was enough to keep going. There was one time after a dinner where Dad spent almost the entire evening talking about one of Daniel's successful deals. I got up early to wash the dishes. Mom followed me into the kitchen. She didn't speak right away. She just stood there for a moment, then gently placed her hand over mine. Emily, she said softly, I've taken care of things for you. I turned to look at her. What do you mean? She smiled. A very faint smile, but there was something different about it. You'll understand later. I thought it was just her way of comforting me. A way to make me feel like I wasn't completely invisible. I didn't ask anything else. Because by then, I was used to not expecting answers. But now, sitting on the wet grass with all my belongings thrown out like trash, those words came back, clearer than ever. I've taken care of things for you. I tightened my grip on the letter. Something didn't match with everything I had believed all these years. And for the first time, I began to wonder. Was my mother really as silent as I thought? Or had I simply never seen what she had been doing? I had always believed my story was simple. A daughter who was never valued. A family where everything leaned toward the son. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like something else was slowly revealing itself. As if all those years of silence weren't helplessness, but preparation. And I was wrong. Completely wrong. Because 8 years ago, while I was still struggling just to survive, my mother had already started building something that no one in this family, not even my father or Daniel, had ever known about. I opened my mother's letter the next morning. Not in a dramatic moment. No immediate tears. Just an ordinary morning in Diane's small kitchen, where I was temporarily staying with a cup of tea that had gone cold without me noticing. I thought I was ready. But it turned out, I had never truly been ready to understand everything my mother had gone through. And everything she had seen, within her own family. Emily, if you are reading this, it means everything has happened in the way I feared most. The first line made my hand freeze. Not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed something I had always felt, but never dared to name. She knew. She knew everything. She knew how my father treated me. She knew what Daniel thought of me. And she knew that one day I would be pushed out of my own family. I kept reading. I tried to change your father, many times. But some beliefs, once they take root in a person, cannot be shaken. I closed my eyes for a moment. I remembered those quiet dinners, the times she almost said something, then stopped, the lingering looks that never turned into words. I used to think that was weakness. But now, I was beginning to understand. It wasn't weakness. It was a woman who had tried everything and realized that direct confrontation would change nothing. So she chose a different way. Silent, but not surrendering. If you've ever thought that someone being quiet means they're doing nothing, you might have been wrong. I couldn't change the way they saw you, but I could make sure that one day, you would no longer depend on their judgment. I set the letter down for a moment. My heartbeat slowed. Something was forming, but I couldn't fully grasp it yet. And then I remembered the last 2 years. The time when everything became clearer than ever. My mother was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. The call came in the middle of my shift. My father's number appeared on the screen, so rare that I knew immediately something was wrong. "Come home," he said. "Your mother is sick." Not "we need you." Not "I need you." Just an order. As if that had always been my role. I didn't ask anything else. I rearranged my life within a week. Moved back home. Switched to night shifts so I could be with her during the day. Took a pay cut of nearly a third. I didn't hesitate long. Because in my mind at that moment, there was only one thing. Here. The days that followed blurred into an endless loop. Hospitals, chemotherapy, vomiting, sleepless nights, mornings when she didn't have the strength to sit up. I learned to do everything. From changing the sheets when she couldn't move, to holding her hand for hours when the medication side effects hit. There were nights I barely slept. But I never thought of it as sacrifice. It was simply what needed to be done. The only thing that made me realize the difference was Daniel. He came 3 times, 3 times in 2 years. Each visit lasted less than an hour. He would walk in wearing an expensive suit, the sharp scent of cologne, a polished watch on his wrist, a quick kiss on Mom's forehead, a few formal questions, then a glance at his watch. Is everything okay? What did the doctor say? I have another meeting. And then he left. As quickly as he arrived. Lauren didn't even try. She showed up once, walked around the house, took a few memorable photos, then posted them online with captions about family and precious moments. During all that time, my father never once acknowledged what I was doing. Not a single thank you, not a single word of recognition. In his eyes, it was simply what a daughter was supposed to do. And maybe that was what exhausted me the most. Not the work, not the lack of sleep, but the feeling of slowly disappearing, becoming part of the house. Something that was always there, but never truly seen. One evening, as I helped my mother take her medicine, she held my hand longer than usual. "Are you tired?" she asked. I shook my head. Not because I wasn't tired, but because I didn't want her to worry. She looked at me for a long time. That look was different. As if she was trying to memorize me. "Emily," she said softly, "no matter what happens, you have to remember one thing." I didn't speak. I just looked at her. "You were never a burden." Those words caught in my throat. Because it was the first time in so many years that someone had said that to me so clearly. I thought she was just comforting me. Like always. But now, looking back, I realized there was something I had missed. During those 2 years, once a month, my mother would ask me to take her somewhere. A small office in Hartford. She said it was for insurance paperwork. I didn't question it. I just waited in the car, watched her walk in, and always come back out with a strange sense of relief. As if each visit she was putting down a burden I couldn't see. Back then I didn't think much of it. But now, everything was starting to connect. The letter in my hand, her words, "I've taken care of things for you," those monthly visits, the look in her eyes in her final days. None of it was random. I had always thought I was the one who stayed. The one who endured. The one who accepted. But maybe I was just the one who didn't know that everything had already been arranged. And what unsettled me the most wasn't what my mother had done. It was a question that began to form in my mind. If she had been preparing for all those years, then Daniel had no idea. And when that truth came out, this wouldn't just be about reading the will. It would be a collapse. Total. With no way back. I used to think that if my mother recovered, everything would be different. That after all those months, after the nights I sat beside her bed after watching her grow so weak she couldn't even hold a glass of water, there would be a better ending. An ending with light. And then, that day came. The doctor said she had passed the critical stage. The tumor was responding well to treatment. Her numbers were stable, no signs of further deterioration. I remember that moment in the clinic so clearly. I was the one who broke down first. Not because I was weak, but because, for the first time in 2 years, I allowed myself to hope. My mother looked at me and smiled. It wasn't a radiant smile, not dramatic, just gentle, but enough to make me believe everything would be okay. We went out for lunch that day to a small place she liked. She ordered a glass of champagne, something she had completely given up since starting treatment. Just a little, she said, as if allowing herself to return to life. We didn't talk much. We just sat there and enjoyed the feeling of normalcy. Something I hadn't realized I missed so much. Then she said something that I didn't pay attention to at the time. Next week, I want to visit your grandmother. I looked up. I'll take you. She shook her head. Your father already promised. Let him do it. I didn't question it. Because in my mind, at that moment, everything was finally falling back into place. Family. A word I had almost forgotten what it felt like. But maybe the moment I started believing that was the moment everything began to fall apart the fastest. 4 weeks later, I was on a night shift. Around 2 a.m., my phone rang. My father's name appeared. I knew immediately something was wrong. He never called at that hour. I stepped into the hallway. The air felt colder than usual. The white lights made everything too clear, too still. I answered. It wasn't my father's voice. It was another man. Are you Emily Carter? I don't remember how I responded. I only remember the words that followed, falling slowly. There was an accident on I-95. A truck. The driver fell asleep. Head-on collision. Fatal on impact. No pause. No time to prepare. Just an ending. I don't remember what I did after that. I don't remember what I said at the hospital. I don't remember how I drove home. I only remember the smell of lavender. When I pulled up in front of the house at nearly 3 a.m., the front garden, the one my mother tended every morning, was still there. But she wasn't. That feeling is hard to describe. Not immediate pain, but a space opening inside you and you know it will never be filled again. The funeral took place 4 days later. St. Andrew's Church. About 80 people. Familiar and unfamiliar faces. Hugs, handshakes, the same repeated words. We're so sorry. Daniel stood at the front. He gave the eulogy. 7 minutes about our father. 2 mentions of our mother. I stood below, gripping a tissue so tightly it crumpled in my hand. Not because I wanted him to say more, but because I realized he had never truly seen her. Not when she was alive, and not even now that she was gone. After the service, as people began to leave, I stayed behind receiving condolences like a reflex. Until Daniel walked toward me. We need to talk. His voice was low enough that no one else could hear. I looked at him. No anger left. Just exhaustion. About what? The house. My heart skipped. Not because I was surprised, but because it was too soon. Daniel, we haven't even read the will yet. He adjusted his tie, his gaze brushing past me as if I were insignificant. I already told you, the will is just a formality. Dad decided a long time ago. I didn't respond immediately. You need to move your things out this week, he continued, his tone flat like he was confirming an appointment. The house is mine now. What did you just say? For the first time, my voice wasn't calm. He sighed lightly, as if I were making things unnecessarily complicated. Emily, you need to be realistic. You stayed there for 2 years because you chose to. No one forced you. Don't turn it into some sacrifice that you think everyone owes you for. That sentence hit hard. Not because it was new, but because it confirmed everything I had tried not to see. I took care of Mom, I said slowly. While you, while I worked, he cut in. Built a career. Did things that actually matter. I looked at him. For a long time. And for the first time in my life, I saw something clearly. We did not live in the same world. Not the same values. Not the same definition of family. I'll give you a week, Daniel said. Get your things out. He turned and walked away. Didn't wait for my response. Lauren stood in the distance, looking at her phone, completely uninterested in the conversation. I stood there. In a room that was slowly emptying, among flowers that were already starting to wilt. And a very clear feeling began to take shape inside me. This wasn't the end. Not my parents' deaths. Not the funeral. Not even being pushed out of the house. All of it was just the beginning. Because there was something Daniel didn't know. Something that even I was only starting to understand. My mother was never someone who accepted fate. She was simply waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, nothing would be the way he expected. I didn't go back to that house right after the funeral. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I knew if I went back too soon I wouldn't be able to stay calm. And at that moment, I needed calm more than anything. Diane took me in that same night. She didn't ask many questions, didn't try to make me talk. She just handed me a blanket, a cup of hot tea, and said something simple. You can stay as long as you need. I nodded. Said nothing. Because sometimes, kindness that clear leaves you not knowing how to respond. That night I barely slept. Not because I wasn't exhausted, but because my mind kept replaying everything. The call, the accident, the funeral, the conversation with Daniel, and Lauren's eyes. That smile. I couldn't forget it. Not because it was cruel, but because it was certain. As if she knew something I didn't. As if everything had already been decided. The next morning, I finally reopened my mother's letter and read the rest. Contact Evelyn Cole. She will help you understand everything. Just one sentence. No explanation, no details. But enough for me to know. My mother hadn't just left words. She had left a plan. I called the number written at the bottom of the letter. The woman on the other end answered quickly, her voice calm and professional. Harrison and Cole. How may I assist you? I'm Emily Carter. I believe my mother Linda Carter worked with Evelyn Cole. A brief pause. Yes, she said. We've been expecting your call. That answer made me freeze. Expecting me. Yes. Miss Cole has your mother's files. Can you come to the office this afternoon? I didn't ask anything else. I just said yes. Because part of me didn't want to interrupt whatever was beginning to unfold. The office was in Hartford. An old building with wooden floors and dim lighting. Everything about it made me feel out of place. My simple clothes, my hastily tied hair, all of it felt mismatched in that space. But when Evelyn Cole walked out, that feeling disappeared. She was in her 50s, neatly silver hair, sharp eyes but not cold. Emily, she said, shaking my hand, your mother spoke about you often. That one sentence made me take a deep breath. We sat down. I placed the letter on the table. My mother said, you have documents. Evelyn looked at the letter, then at me. Not just documents, she said. An 8-year plan. 8 years. That number slowed everything inside me. 8 years ago, I started college, I said quietly. Evelyn nodded. That's when she began. Began what? She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers interlaced as if choosing each word carefully. Your mother understood her family very well, she said slowly. She knew what her husband believed. She knew what her son would become. And most importantly, she knew what her daughter would have to face. I said nothing. Because everything she said was true. She couldn't change them, Evelyn continued. But she could do something else. What? Move ahead of them. The room fell silent for a moment. You mean? I mean, Evelyn leaned slightly forward. Everything Daniel thinks he will inherit is not where he thinks it is. My heart started beating faster. But my father... Your father can leave whatever he wants in his will, Evelyn interrupted gently, but not everything is in the will. That sentence felt like a missing piece. Not complete, but enough to reveal a larger picture. I need you to do one thing, Evelyn said. I will. Wait. I looked at her. Wait until the reading of the will, she said. Don't react to anything Daniel says. Don't sign anything. Don't accept any offers. Offers. She smiled slightly. He'll try. And soon. I didn't understand everything. But I believed her. Not because I fully understood the situation, but because, for the first time in years, I felt like someone was telling me the truth without hiding anything. 3 days later, Daniel called me. Around 10 p.m. I was sitting in Diane's kitchen trying to read a book I couldn't remember a single line from. His name lit up on the screen. I hesitated for a second, then answered. Emily, his voice was different. I think we should talk. About what? About making things simpler. I didn't respond immediately. I've spoken to a lawyer, he continued, and I want to offer you a deal. My hand tightened slightly. Just like Evelyn said. What kind of deal? If you sign a waiver and agree not to contest the estate, I'll give you $10,000. I stayed silent for a few seconds. Not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to be sure I heard it correctly. 10,000. It's a fair amount, he said quickly. Enough for you to start over, rent a place, get stable, better than dragging this out and ending up with nothing. His voice was confident. Certain. As if he were making a generous offer. As if I should be grateful. I refuse, I said. No hesitation, no explanation. Silence on the other end for a second. Then his tone changed. You're making a mistake, Emily. Maybe. You won't get anything. I'm telling you the truth. I still refuse. A longer silence. Then he spoke again, slower, colder. Fine, but don't say I didn't give you a chance. I hung up. Set the phone down. My hand trembled slightly. Not out of fear, but because, for the first time in my life, I didn't step back. And that began to change everything. I looked down at my mother's letter still lying on the table. One sentence now carried its full meaning. I've taken care of things for you. I took a deep breath. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was being pushed out anymore. I was waiting. Waiting for something bigger. And deep down I knew, when the will was read, it wouldn't just be a surprise. It would be a reversal. A reversal Daniel would never see coming. After that call, I did nothing. I didn't call back, didn't text, didn't tell anyone except Diane. I just stayed silent. The kind of silence I used to fear. Because I always thought, if I didn't speak up, I would be overpowered. If I didn't react, I would be swept away. But this time, it felt different. Not passive, but controlled. I remembered Evelyn's words. Don't react, just wait. It sounded simple. But when you've just lost your family, been thrown out of your home, and treated like you don't exist by your own brother, waiting becomes one of the hardest things you can do. Because everything inside you wants the opposite. To prove something, to argue back, to take something back. But this time, I didn't. And that was what started to shake Daniel. 2 days later, he called again. This time his voice wasn't calm. What are you doing? I'm not doing anything. Don't pretend, he cut in. You think staying silent is a way to pressure me. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I knew silence had more value now than any words. Emily, he said slower, this time tension creeping into his voice. I'm trying to help you. I don't need it. You will, he snapped. When you realize you have nothing. I looked out the window. The afternoon light filtered softly through the glass, making everything look so normal, almost absurd compared to this conversation. I'll wait for the will reading, I said. A short sentence, but enough to shift everything. That's not necessary, he replied immediately. I already told you. I'll wait. I repeated it. Slower, clearer. Silence on the other end. A longer silence than before. And that's when I realized, for the first time, he wasn't sure anymore. Are you listening to someone, he asked? I didn't answer. Emily, his voice dropped, more cautious now. If you're working with a lawyer. I hung up. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need to hear more. I set the phone down. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't racing. Just a strange feeling. Like for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being cornered. The days that followed passed slowly. No big drama, no direct confrontation. Just small signs. Daniel texted more often, shorter messages, more urgent. We need to talk. You're making things complicated. I don't have time for this. I didn't respond. Not a single message. Not a single call. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was doing one thing and one thing only. Waiting. And the longer I waited, the more I realized something. Daniel wasn't just confident. He needed money. Not in a nice-to-have way, but in a way where not having it would cause problems. I started connecting details I had ignored before. The way Lauren once said we need this during a conversation. The way Daniel talked about big projects but never gave specifics. The way his lifestyle kept upgrading, faster than it made sense. It all started to come together. Not success, but pressure. A kind of pressure you can hide for a while. But not forever. 3 days before the will reading, he called again. This time, no pretense. I'll raise it to 25,000. I was standing in the kitchen holding a glass of water. I didn't drink. I just stood there, listening. If you sign now, he said quickly, I'll transfer it the same day. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I was thinking. but because I wanted to hear what he would say next. Emily, this is your last chance, he continued. After the will reading, things will get more complicated. You won't have any advantage. I don't need an advantage. Then what do you need? That question made me pause for a second. Not because I didn't know, but because, for the first time in a long time, I could answer it clearly. The truth. Silence. 1 second. 2. Then he laughed. Not amused, but irritated. You think you'll find the truth where, he asked? In a room reading paperwork? We'll see. No, he said, his voice turning cold. You won't find anything. You'll only see what's already been decided. I didn't say anything. Because this time, I knew he was wrong. Not a feeling. A certainty. Your choice, he said. But don't say I didn't warn you. The call ended. I set the phone down. Exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not tension. Just readiness. I looked at the clock on the wall. 3 days. 3 days. Before everything Daniel believed to be true started to fall apart. And what gave me the most calm in that moment wasn't the idea that I might win. It was that I no longer needed to win. Because if what my mother prepared was real, then that will reading wouldn't just be a meeting. It would be the moment when every truth buried for years was finally brought into the light. And this time, I wouldn't be standing on the sidelines anymore. 3 days before the will reading, I went back to that house. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew, if I didn't face it now, I would carry that feeling with me for the rest of this story. Diane offered to come with me. I didn't refuse. Not because I was afraid, but because this time I didn't want to walk in there alone. We arrived in the afternoon. It wasn't raining, but the air still felt damp from the previous days. The road leading to the house was the same. The trees on both sides stood still as if nothing had changed. Only me. I no longer belonged there. I stood in front of the door for a few seconds. Not because I couldn't open it, but because I was preparing myself for the feeling I knew was coming. I rang the bell. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Diane looked at me. Are you sure they're home? I don't know, I said, but I think they don't want to open the door. I walked around to the back. The garage wasn't locked. I pushed the door open. And in that moment, I understood. This house hadn't been my home for a long time. Not because the locks had changed, but because everything inside had. My mother's belongings, gone. The family photos on the walls, removed. The chair she used to sit in, replaced with something more modern, colder. Even the scent was different. No more soft lavender I had known for years. Instead, a strong, unfamiliar perfume. Lorraine. I stepped slowly inside. Not to look for anything, but to confirm one thing. They hadn't just thrown me out. They had erased me from this place. I think we should go, Diane said softly behind me. I didn't respond. Because at that moment, I heard footsteps. Lauren appeared from the stairs. She stopped when she saw me. A flash of surprise in her eyes. Just for a second. Then it returned to normal. Cold, controlled, and confident. Emily, she said, as if we had just run into each other in public. I didn't think you'd come back. I came to get the rest of my things. She raised an eyebrow slightly. Your things have been handled. I looked at her. Handled. What was left wasn't valuable, she said evenly. We cleared it out. A simple sentence. But enough for me to understand how little I meant to them. That was my property. And this is our house. She replied instantly. No hesitation. No thought. As if it were an unquestionable truth. I took another step forward. Not to argue. But because I wasn't stepping back anymore. Where's Daniel? He's not here. I'll wait. Lauren let out a soft laugh. You really think you still have that right? I didn't answer. Because I realized this wasn't a conversation meant to persuade. It was a performance. She was speaking to me. And also to herself. That everything belonged to them now. I think you should accept reality, Lauren continued. Daniel was very generous with his offer. Generous, I repeated. 25,000 isn't a small amount, she said, especially for someone like you. She didn't have to finish the sentence. I understood. Someone like me. A nurse. Someone with no future. Someone who chose to stay and take care. I looked straight at her. You know, I said slowly, there's one thing you and Daniel are both wrong about. She didn't interrupt. They think I'm trying to take something from you. I paused for a second. But in reality, I'm just waiting for you to lose everything yourselves. The air in the room shifted. Subtle. But undeniable. Lauren didn't smile anymore. Her expression froze for a moment. Then she laughed. You think this is a movie, she said? Or do you really believe there's going to be some big twist? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because this time, I wasn't speaking to convince. I was speaking because I already knew. 3 days, I said. We'll find out. She stared at me for a few seconds. Then shrugged. Fine, she said. We'll be there. Of course you will. I turned and walked away. No more words. No looking back. Because I had seen enough. Outside, the air felt cooler. Diane didn't ask anything at first. We walked to the car in silence. Only after I closed the door did she speak. Are you okay? I nodded. Not to reassure her. But because I truly was. I think I'm better than I expected. I looked back at the house through the window. The lights inside were starting to turn on. Everything looked normal. Like a family living there. Like it had always belonged to them. But I knew that was just the surface. A shell. A certainty, built on the wrong assumptions. And those assumptions were about to break. 3 days. Not much time left. And for the first time since everything began, I no longer felt like I was being pushed away. I was moving forward. Slowly. But surely. Because I knew. When the will reading began, everything they were holding so tightly would start slipping away. Piece by piece. And this time, I would be there. Not to beg. Not to fight. But to witness how it all falls apart. The night before the will reading, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was anxious. Not exactly because I was nervous. It was something else, like standing in front of a door knowing that once you open it, everything on the other side will change completely. No going back. No way to keep things the same. I sat in Diane's living room, the soft yellow light casting shadows across the floor. The wall clock ticked steadily slow enough that I could hear every second passing. Everything around me was quiet. Too quiet. But inside my mind, it wasn't. I replayed every small detail from the past few days. Lauren's expression when I returned to the house. Daniel's voice when he raised the offer. The way he lost patience, then shifted to pressure. All of it pointed to one thing. They weren't as certain as they pretended to be. And when someone starts losing certainty, they will do anything to hold on to control. Even if that control is just an illusion. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. My hands didn't shake. My breathing was steady. A state I had never known before, in moments like this. Maybe because this time, I had nothing left to lose. And when you have nothing left to lose, you have nothing left to fear. I sat back down, picking up my phone. No new messages. No calls. Daniel had stopped. Or maybe he was waiting. Just like me. But we were waiting for different reasons. I was waiting to see the truth. He was waiting to hold on to something he believed was already his. The next morning I woke up early. No alarm. No one calling me. My body just knew what day it was. I dressed simply, not too formal, not trying to impress. Because I wasn't going there to prove anything. I was going to end something. Diane offered to drive me. I agreed. We barely spoke on the way. Not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes silence is the only way to keep things from breaking too soon. The Harrison and Cole building came into view. Old, solid, quiet. Like a place that had witnessed many stories, ending in ways no one expected. I stepped inside. The familiar scent of wood and old paper. Everything was the same as before. Only I was not. The receptionist nodded when she saw me. "Miss Cole is expecting you." I nodded back. Then walked into the meeting room. A long table, chairs neatly arranged, soft lighting. No one there yet. I was the first to arrive. I chose a seat in the middle. Not at the head. Not in the corner. Just a place where I could see everything. A few minutes later, the door opened. Daniel walked in. Lauren right behind him. Both dressed perfectly, polished, confident. At least, on the surface. Daniel paused when he saw me. His eyes passed over me, then lingered a moment longer than usual. No longer that absolute certainty from before. Just a flicker of something, brief. But I saw it. Lauren looked at me too. No smile. No greeting. She simply pulled out a chair and sat down as if I didn't exist. A few seconds later, Daniel spoke. "I didn't expect you to be this early." "I didn't want to be late." He nodded. Said nothing more. The air in the room tightened, just slightly. No arguments. No sharp words. Just a silence everyone understood. Everything was about to begin. And no one knew for sure which direction it would go. The door opened again. Evelyn walked in. With another woman. Older. Silver hair, straight posture, sharp alert eyes. I recognized her instantly. My grandmother. Daniel recognized her too. And for the first time, I saw him truly lose composure. "What is she doing here?" he asked, his voice no longer steady. My grandmother didn't answer immediately. She walked in, pulled out a chair, and sat down next to me. Then looked straight at Daniel. I was invited. 3 words. But enough to shift the entire atmosphere in the room. Lauren glanced at Daniel. Just a quick look. But I understood. They hadn't prepared for this. And when you're not prepared, you start losing control. Evelyn placed the file on the table. Arranged everything carefully. Not rushed. Not slow. Just precise. "We'll begin now," she said. No one objected. No one spoke. I placed my hand on the table. Lightly. But firmly. My heart wasn't racing. No shaking. Just focus. Because I knew everything leading to this moment was not random. 8 years. 8 years my mother had been preparing. 8 years in silence. 8 years that no one in this room had ever known about. And in just a few minutes, everything would be revealed. I looked at Daniel one last time before Evelyn opened the file. He was still sitting straight, still trying to appear calm. But I could see it clearly. A crack had formed. Small, but impossible to hide. And I knew that was only the beginning. Because what was about to happen would not just be a will reading. It would be the moment when every false belief began to collapse. The room fell silent as Evelyn opened the first file. The soft sound of paper turning felt louder than usual, as if all of us were focused on every tiny detail. "Before we begin," she said calmly, "I need to clarify one thing." Daniel leaned slightly forward. Lauren placed her hand on the table, her fingers tapping unconsciously. "I will be reading 2 separate wills," Evelyn continued. "One from Mr. Robert Carter and one from Mrs. Linda Carter." Daniel paused. "2?" he asked. "Yes. But everything is joint property." Evelyn looked directly at him. "Not everything. Just one sentence. But enough to shift the air in the room. Subtle, but unmistakable." I said nothing. Just sat there, watching. For the first time, I wasn't being pulled into the story. I was watching it unfold. Evelyn opened the first will. The will of Robert Carter, signed and notarized 14 months ago. Her voice was steady, clear, without emotion. Daniel straightened his back. Lauren tilted her head, slightly focused. They were waiting. Waiting for something they believed was certain. And just as they expected, the first part of the will was very normal. Standard clauses, funeral expenses, executor details. Until Evelyn reached the asset distribution. 70% of personal assets are left to the son Daniel Carter. Daniel gave a slight nod. A tiny reflex. But enough to show he had been waiting for that line. The remaining 30% is to be given to the daughter Emily Carter. Lauren exhaled softly. Not disappointment, but confirmation. I looked at them. There was nothing surprising in their reactions. Because this was exactly what they had believed all along. After expenses and liabilities, Evelyn continued. Emily Carter's share is estimated to be. She glanced down. Approximately $24,000. A small number. Compared to everything they had imagined. The house, the assets, all of it. Daniel turned to me. His eyes no longer tense. Just a trace of satisfaction. See, he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. I told you. I didn't respond. No reaction. No need. Because I knew. This was only the beginning. Evelyn closed the first will. Not rushed. Not emphasized. Just finished. That concludes the will of Robert Carter. Daniel leaned back. More relaxed. Lauren too. Both of them eased, even if just slightly. Because in their minds, everything was clear. But then Evelyn opened the second file. And the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. No loud sound. No one speaking. Just a feeling. Like stepping into a room and knowing something isn't right. The will of Linda Carter, Evelyn said. Daniel frowned. My mother didn't have separate assets, he said immediately. Everything was under my father's name. Evelyn didn't look at him. She simply continued. This will was updated 18 months ago. It has been reviewed for legal capacity by an independent psychologist with full video documentation. Daniel froze. Video. To ensure there is no dispute over its validity, Evelyn replied. Her tone remained even. But each word landed exactly where it needed to. Lauren's fingers stopped tapping. Completely. Evelyn took out a separate sheet. Not a legal document. A letter. I will read the opening as requested by Linda Carter. I tightened my hand slightly. Not from tension, but because I knew this voice. Not Evelyn's. My mother's, through every word. To my children. The room became absolutely still. No breathing sounds. No movement. Only Evelyn's voice. If you are hearing this, it means I am no longer there to say it myself. Daniel didn't move. Lauren didn't either. But I could see. They were listening. Really listening. First, I want to say that I love you both. Evelyn paused for a second, then continued. But love does not mean I do not see the truth. Daniel's hand tightened. Slightly. But I saw it. For many years, I have watched how this family operates. Her voice stayed calm. No drama. No intensity. But that made it heavier. The son is favored. The daughter is expected to accept. Lauren glanced at Daniel. A quick look. No words. But clear. They were starting to feel it. Something was wrong. Emily worked hard to build her own life. I didn't look at anyone. Just down at the table. She paid for her own education, took care of herself, and when I needed her, she stayed. The air in the room grew heavier. For 2 years of my illness, Emily was with me every day. Evelyn paused. Then read on. Daniel visited 3 times. No one spoke. No one moved. But for the first time, the truth was spoken. Without argument, without emotion. Just recorded. This is not blame, Evelyn continued. It is context. Daniel took a deep breath. as if preparing to speak. But he didn't. Because he couldn't. Not here. What I leave to Emily is not a reward. A pause. Very brief. But enough to pull everyone's attention. It is the balance I could not create while I was alive. Lauren straightened in her seat. Daniel no longer leaned back. Both of them, tense now. I could feel it. Clearly. Not through words. But through the silence. A different silence than before. No longer waiting. But worrying. Evelyn placed the letter down. Gently. But decisively. We will now proceed with the asset distribution of Linda Carter. Daniel spoke immediately. Wait. His voice no longer calm. What you just read doesn't change anything. Right. Evelyn looked at him. Didn't answer right away. And that pause made everything clearer. Mr. Carter, she said, that was only the introduction. One sentence. Soft. But enough to make everything inside Daniel begin to shift. And I knew, in just a few minutes, everything he believed was certain would no longer exist. No one spoke after Evelyn said that. But everyone understood. The real part had only just begun. Evelyn pulled a thicker file toward her, stamped signatures and neatly arranged pages. No rush, no hesitation, just certainty. The first asset, she said, is the property at 127 Maple Drive. Daniel immediately looked up. That house belongs to my father, he said. It's clearly stated in the will. Evelyn didn't argue. She simply slid a document toward him. This is the ownership transfer signed 5 years ago. Daniel took it. Flipped quickly. Then slowed. I saw it clearly. That moment. The moment he realized something wasn't right. That's not possible, he said, his voice lower. My father would never... The house was transferred into Linda Carter's name, Evelyn said calmly, due to legal reasons related to a lawsuit involving Robert Carter at the time. Lauren leaned forward. But that was temporary. No, Evelyn interrupted gently. The transfer was never reversed. Silence. No one moved. Daniel looked down at the paper. Then back up. That doesn't mean... It means Evelyn said clearly the house legally belonged to Linda Carter at the time of her passing. Ah, brief pause. And in her will, she leaves full ownership of the house to Emily Carter. Nothing. No sound. No immediate reaction. Just emptiness. As if everyone in the room needed a few seconds to understand what had just been said. Lauren reacted first. No, she said. That's not possible. Her voice no longer controlled. No longer calm. Just instinct. Daniel stood up abruptly. This is a mistake, he said. It has to be a mistake. Evelyn remained composed. These documents are registered with the Land Authority. They can be verified at any time. Daniel shook his head. My father would never agree to this. He did, Evelyn replied, because he believed it was temporary. She paused. But in reality, it was never reversed. Lauren turned to Daniel. You told me the house was ours. Not a question. En accusation. Daniel didn't answer. Because for the first time, he didn't have one. Evelyn continued. She didn't stop. Didn't give them time to recover. The second asset, she said, is an irrevocable trust. Daniel turned back. What? A trust established 8 years ago with Emily Carter as the sole beneficiary. My heart beat faster. Not from surprise, but because I was finally hearing it spoken clearly. This trust was funded by separate capital, not part of the family's shared assets, Evelyn continued. Daniel shook his head. No, that's not true. I've never heard of. Exactly, Evelyn said. You've never heard of it. A quiet sentence, but enough to cut through everything. The initial amount was $400,000 invested over the past 8 years. Lauren's hands tightened. Current value, approximately $1.2 million. The air in the room compressed. Daniel didn't sit anymore. He stood there, as if his body no longer knew what to do. That's impossible, he repeated. My mother didn't have that kind of money. The funds came from Emily's grandmother, Evelyn said, and were kept completely separate. My grandmother sat still, said nothing. But her eyes confirmed everything. Lauren turned to her. You knew about this? Yes. One word. No explanation. No apology. Just truth. Daniel looked between them. His gaze began to waver. No more anger. No more confidence. Just confusion. The third asset, Evelyn continued, is a life insurance policy. Daniel let out a short laugh. Not amused. Mom bought insurance. For what? To protect her daughter, Evelyn replied. She opened another document. Policy value $500,000. Lauren covered her mouth. Speechless. Sole beneficiary, Emily Carter. Nothing left to misunderstand. Nothing left to argue. Everything was clear. Evelyn set her pen down. Total assets. She glanced at the page. House, approximately $650,000. Trust $1.2 million. Insurance $500,000, plus 30% from Robert Carter's will. She looked up. Emily Carter will receive approximately $2.3 million. The number hung in the air. Heavy. No one spoke. No one moved. Only truth. Daniel stood frozen, his eyes wide but unfocused, as if his mind was trying to process, but couldn't keep up. Lauren's hand slipped from the table. Slowly, like everything had just left her. No, she whispered. Daniel stepped back. Then another. I'll sue, he said. This isn't legal. Evelyn shook her head. Everything has been verified. Medical capacity, documentation, video evidence, witnesses. She looked directly at him. Linda Carter prepared for this. Daniel said nothing. Didn't argue. Didn't continue. Because he understood. Not logically, but instinctively. Everything was over. Abruptly, he raised a hand to his forehead. Then, it happened fast. His body swayed. His eyes lost focus. And before anyone could react, he collapsed. The sound hit the floor, sharp and final. Lauren screamed. Evelyn stood up immediately. The assistant called emergency services. I remained seated. Didn't move. Didn't rush over. Not because I didn't care, but because I had known this moment would come. Not like this, but in some form. Like this. A collapse. Not just of a person, but of a belief. That they were always entitled, always right, always in control. My grandmother placed her hand over mine. Gently. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked down. Then at Daniel, lying on the floor. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Didn't feel satisfaction. Just something strange. Light. As if something had finally left me. "Mom was right," I said softly. My grandmother squeezed my hand. "Yes," she said. Outside, the sound of an ambulance grew closer. Louder. Clearer. But inside that room, everything had already ended before they arrived. And I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Just the first time everything had finally been put back where it belonged. Everything that followed moved slower than I expected. There were no more arguments, no more confrontations. Just consequences. Real onus. Daniel wasn't seriously hurt. The doctor said it was a shock response, a sudden drop in blood pressure. His body couldn't handle the psychological stress. It sounded clinical. But everyone understood. It wasn't just a faint. It was the moment the entire world he believed in collapsed. Lauren left with him. She didn't look at me. Didn't say a word. No more smile, no more control. Just silence. A different kind of silence. Not confidence. But nothing left to say. The room slowly emptied. Only me, Evelyn, my grandmother, and the truth still lingering in the air. No one rushed to leave. No one needed to say anything more. Because everything that mattered had already been said. Evelyn spoke first. "Do you want to review the full documentation?" she asked. I shook my head. No. Not because I didn't care. But because I didn't need more proof to believe what I had just witnessed. She nodded. Didn't ask again. Just carefully gathered the documents, like closing a completed process. I stood up. Slowly. No rush. No sense of victory like I once imagined. No immediate relief. Just space. But no pain. My grandmother stepped closer. Her eyes softer now. "You did well," she said. I shook my head. Not me. I looked down at my hands. It was Mom. She smiled gently. "Your mother opened the path," she said, "but you were the one who walked it." I didn't reply. Because I knew. She was right. I glanced at the chair where Daniel had been sitting. Empty. Just like so many things in my life had once been. But this time, it felt different. Not absence. But closure. 3 weeks after the will reading, things began to shift. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just, piece by piece. I received the official documents. The house, the trust, the insurance. Everything. Clear. Legal. Undeniable. Daniel didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't show up. As if he needed time to understand what had happened. Or to accept that he no longer had control. Lauren was different. I saw her in a photo. Not because I searched. Someone sent it. A post online. A caption about a new beginning. No mention of family. No mention of the house. Just a rewritten version of the story. One she created to make it easier to live with. I didn't react. Didn't comment. Didn't need to. Because truth doesn't need to argue. It only needs to exist. One evening, Diane asked me, "Are you going to move back there?" I stayed quiet for a moment. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted to be sure. "Not yet," I said. She nodded. Didn't ask more. Because she understood. That house wasn't just property. It was memory. The days I lived there, in pain, in silence, in effort. And the day I was pushed out, I wasn't ready to go back. Not out of fear, but because, when I return, it has to be a choice. Not something forced. One afternoon, my grandmother called. Her voice steady as always. "Daniel sold the house in Greenwich," she said. I wasn't surprised. Just asked. "Really?" "Yes." And Lauren left. I was silent for a few seconds. Not because I didn't understand, but because I was placing everything where it belonged. "Is he okay?" I asked. A question. I wasn't even sure why I asked. She exhaled softly. "He's okay. In the way someone is after losing everything they thought was theirs." I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me. "I don't hate him," I said. "I know. But I can't go back to how things were." "You don't have to," she replied. "Forgiveness doesn't mean returning." I sat still. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning. Maybe that was what took me the longest to understand. I don't have to hold on to a relationship just because it once existed. I don't have to accept the same treatment just because it's family. I don't have to go back to a place where I was invisible. Because this time, I finally saw who I am. And that mattered more than everything I had just received. But this story isn't over. Because what my mother left behind wasn't just money, not just a house, but a choice. And I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with it. 6 months after the will reading, I returned to that house. For the first time, no Daniel, no Lauren, no one inside, making me feel like I didn't belong. Just me, and the key in my hand. I stood at the door for a moment, not because I was afraid to go in, but because I realized this time it felt completely different. I turned the key. The door opened. No cold final click like before. No sense of rejection. Just a quiet space waiting for me to enter. I walked slowly through each room. The living room. The kitchen. The hallway. Everything was almost the same. And yet, not the same at all. Not because of the furniture, but because I had changed. I stepped into the backyard. The lavender garden was still there. Not perfect. Some bushes had dried, some patches were empty. But among it all, There were new sprouts. Small, but undeniable. I knelt down gently, touching a young branch. And for the first time, I understood why my mother chose this plant. Lavender isn't the most beautiful, but it's resilient. It survives harsh seasons. It doesn't need much to keep going. Like her. And maybe, like me, I didn't move back in right away. I rented it out. A small family. The mother was also a nurse. Two daughters. When they came to see the house, the older girl asked me, "Can I take care of the garden?" I looked at her, then nodded. Yes. Not because I no longer needed it, but because I wanted it to keep living. The way my mother started it. I kept a few things. My mother's old watch, a photo album I found in her room, and the sapphire ring my grandmother gave me after the will reading. Things with no great monetary value, but enough to hold what truly mattered. I paid off my student debt, switched to day shifts, and enrolled in a nurse practitioner program, something I once thought was out of reach. Not because I had money, but because, for the first time, I had a choice. Not choosing within limits, but choosing because I wanted to. Daniel reached out. Not much. Just one message. "I'm sorry." I read it. Didn't reply immediately. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed to be sure. Not about him, about myself. A week later, I replied, "I understand." That was all. No more. No less. Because some relationships can't return to where they began. But they don't have to end in hatred either. Lauren disappeared from the story, as if she had never truly belonged in it. And maybe that was the truth. I didn't follow. Didn't look into it. Didn't need to. Because my life no longer revolved around them. One evening, I sat on the small balcony of my new apartment. Diane was in the kitchen playing soft music. A gentle breeze passed through. I looked down at my mother's watch on my wrist. The hands were still moving. Slow. Steady. Just like everything in my life was finally returning to its rhythm. I remembered a line from my mother's letter. "I couldn't change the way they saw you, but I could make sure that one day you wouldn't need it anymore." Back then, I didn't fully understand. But now, I did. My mother didn't just leave me money. Not just the house. Not just the trust. She gave me a position. A place I had never had before. Not in the family. But, in my own life. I was no longer the daughter who wasn't chosen. No longer someone who had to prove her worth through sacrifice. No longer someone standing on the sidelines, waiting to be seen. I was the one who decided. I chose my work. I chose where I lived. I chose who was allowed into my life, and who wasn't. And that, no one could take away from me. I sat there a little longer. Not thinking too much. Not searching for some grand meaning. Just feeling. A kind of quiet I had never known before. Not because everything was perfect, but because, for the first time, I wasn't chasing the need to be enough in someone else's eyes. I had been enough. All along. I just finally believed it. And maybe That was the most valuable thing my mother left behind.